Welcome to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. I'm Zach Kaufman here with Ryan D'Amico, bringing you a brand new episode.
We are back. My man. Yes, we are. Look, life is good right now for me. My Philadelphia Eagles are 6-1. They sit atop the NFL. I can't believe it. If you would have told me at the beginning of the season, or if anyone would have told me when we did our NFC breakdown that the Eagles would be 6-1 after 7 weeks, they would have won 5 games in a row. Carson Wentz would be playing like an MVP player. I'm not so sure I would have believed you, but hey, I'm going to take it. I'm going to run with this as long as it goes on. And yeah, man, I'm in a great mood. You're going to get a lot of energy out of me tonight because I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, obviously because of the game. But it's always easier to get up after those primetime games after it's a win. That's for damn sure.
And I know I laughed at you in the offseason when you said the Eagles would have a winning record. I have a huge respect right now. They are definitely playing well. Even as a Cowboys fan, I will be fascinated to see those teams match up. But I'm feeling great too. I'm ready to get started here. So we'll start with you bringing us some college football from this past weekend.
Yeah, college football, man. I'll tell you what, this college season is really starting to take off here. I mean, we're going to look back at week 8. Week 9, it's already going to be week 9 this weekend. This college football season seems like it just started. And here we are recapping week 8. Look, we're going to start at the big game last week. College game day was there. It was a big game around my neck of the woods up here in PA. And a big game for me as well because I'm a Michigan fan. As good as things are going for my NFL team, the Eagles, things are not going so good for my college team and the University of Michigan. They get absolutely throttled by Penn State, 42-13. And it's funny because that game couldn't have started off any worse for Michigan, and it couldn't have started off any better for Penn State. Second play of the game, Saquon Barkley takes a direct snap. He goes 69 yards. 69. Goes 69 yards for a touchdown. That's less than a minute into the game, and Penn State's up 7-0. Michigan gets the ball, does nothing with it, punts, and then Barkley scores another touchdown. So less than 5 minutes into the game, Penn State's up 14-0. You got to credit though Michigan. They do end up coming back to cut it to within 1. A missed extra point in there would have tied the game. But look, they got it to within 1. And what I thought was the real turning point in the game was right before halftime. Penn State was able to go on a 75-yard touchdown drive and score with under a minute left, a touchdown. To go up 8. Now, look, I know they're only up 8 going into half, but I felt like that score right there was one of them scores where it just really gained momentum back for Penn State. And Michigan goes, I think, 3-and-out after the half. And then, kind of just snowballed after that for Michigan. They don't score any points in the second half. McSorley, he has a big game as well. He accounts for I think 4 or 5 touchdowns, and Penn State continues to march on. That's a big win for Penn State. They have another big game this weekend coming up. I'll get to that here in a little bit. But you tip your hat to Penn State, man. They were clicking on all cylinders. I was talking to a bunch of friends of mine that are Penn State fans, and the first thing I said to all of them, I said that was one of the best called games I've seen at any level in some time. Like, Penn State was coming off a bye week. They were really prepared for the Michigan defense. A Michigan defense that going into that game was ranked first in the country. It was really stifling people. But that game was called just fantastic by Joe Moorhead and Penn State. So you tip your hat to Penn State and Michigan. They're licking their wounds. They're 5-2. Their season's basically over. They're going to be playing in some Florida bowl game somewhere. So, but hey, it is what it is. And look, even though Michigan's done, I still love college football, and I still look forward to some of these marquee matchups as we go down the stretch and into into the college football playoff. So that was the big game last week. Obviously, that was one of two big games. Both quote-unquote big games last week were absolute duds as far as competitiveness goes. Like we say, Penn State blows out Michigan. And then the other big game, the other 7:30 primetime game, USC traveled to South Bend to take on Notre Dame, Zach. And Notre Dame just absolutely just pounded USC. At one point in this game, Notre Dame was up 28-0. Just got out to a very good start. Quarterback Brandon Wimbush, ever since being inserted and starting, he's really given them a shot in the arm, especially with his legs. Really good at keeping plays alive and scrambling, getting outside the pocket. And then a guy that's getting a lot of attention now this week is Josh Adams, their running back, who he had 19 carries for 191 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's putting together a very nice year for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame, slowly but surely now, they're back in the top 10, and they're having a nice year as well. Flip the script with USC, man. This is what USC does, though. I mean, if you look back, ever since Pete Carroll left, when USC starts the season ranked this high, which I believe the beginning of the year this year they were ranked 4th, I want to say. When they're ranked that high, inside the top 10, definitely inside the top 5, things don't go very well for USC. I mean, they're 6-2. They already have 2 losses. Their season's not looking so hot. Got a break with Washington losing earlier in the year, but still an uphill fight now for USC going forward. So, and Sam Darnold, look, was 20-28, 229 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Had a decent game. I mean, he can't play defense. It's kind of hard for him when the team gets down 28-0. But look, he's still a fantastic quarterback. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. But that's what USC does, man. They seem to – they can't live up to these expectations right now. Could under Pete Carroll. They're really struggling ever since he left. So that was the other big game of the day.
Out of those 2 games you've already brought up, there's 3 top 5 projected draft picks among those. And Saquon Barkley, I've even seen him as potentially going number 1 in some mock drafts, but he's consistently been right around the top 3. Sam Darnold for the last almost 2 years has been projected as probably the number 1 pick, definitely top 5. And then for Notre Dame, they've also got Mike McGlinchey, an offensive tackle, who's projected to be a top 5, definitely top 10 pick. So each of those teams have some guys really standing out there. And Barkley, we've talked about before how Michigan has had a good defense throughout the season, and he's able to perform even against a tough defense. And obviously scouts, NFL teams, that they've been watching him all year. That's continuing to really stand out. And teams are looking – there's going to be a team that really wants to build around him at the NFL level.
Yeah, look, whoever gets Saquon Barkley is going to get a fantastic football player. And he's a very good kid too, as well. I mean, he's definitely got a good head on his shoulders, which is key. I mean, obviously something that I use Carson Wentz as the example. Great player, better person. That to me, I like seeing that. I like seeing when you can get both. Great player, great person. I've never been a big fan of like the Odell Beckhams of the world, like that are just a head case. That's just never been the kind of player that I gravitate to. But you're right, Barkley's going to really make some team happy. Whoever can get their hands on him. And look, he showed again on Saturday night why. If he's not the best college football player in the country, he's definitely one of the top 2 or 3. I'm having a hard time finding someone right now that's better than him. He does everything. So, and
there's some definitely running back needy teams that are looking to be at the top of the draft too. So he will definitely be going early.
For sure. 2 other games I want to touch on just briefly, really briefly. The University of Miami squeaks out another win, home win against Syracuse, 4-4 Syracuse. Miami's, I'll be honest, man, I've been seeing a lot of people really high on Miami and saying this is a team that could possibly make a good run as we go down the stretch here. I personally don't see it. I personally see a luck box that eventually is going to get emptied here soon. They're flirting with disaster here, man. Another tough game that they almost, Syracuse had a chance to go down and tie that game late. Ultimately couldn't get it done. Credit Miami for getting a stop, but this is now the third straight game where they had to really scratch and claw to get a victory. And look, I've been saying too, I mean, like, they haven't played anyone either. Like, that's the thing. Like, their schedules, I want to read you off their schedule, the teams that they've played. And, I mean, there's not one team that I look at and say, that's a good win. I'm dead serious. Bethune-Cookman, Arkansas State was canceled. That's probably a good thing because Arkansas State is nothing special. Toledo, Duke, Florida State. Now, Florida State in the beginning of the year, that was projected to be a marquee game, a good win if they could get it. But they were without their starting quarterback, and everyone kind of sees what Florida State is at this point. They're a 3-3 team. Georgia Tech, who is nothing special at all. They struggled and had to go on a game-winning drive to win that game. And then Syracuse this past weekend. I mean, they have really done nothing, in my opinion, yet continue to move up the rankings. They're now ranked number 8th in the country. I don't see it with Miami. Look, good team, young team, good defense. Offense, I still have some question marks. They lose their best player, Walton. He's out for the year. I think as we go down the stretch here, that's really going to hurt them, and that's really going to hurt them more than it has here lately. So for me, Miami is just – I think the clock's going to strike midnight for them here soon.
Do you have a projection on when you think that's going to be if they have an upcoming game that stands out?
Look, I wouldn't be surprised if they lose 2 games. I mean, they're fortunate that their schedule is extremely easy as we go down the stretch. This week they take on North Carolina. They're one of the worst teams in Power 5, and then after that is where their two toughest games remain, both of which are at home, which is fortunate for them. They take on Virginia Tech, which is a huge game in the ACC. And then they have Notre Dame coming to town, which right now, that Virginia Tech game, they could beat Virginia Tech. I really think they could beat Virginia Tech. It's going to be a good game, but I think Miami would take that being at home. Notre Dame, though, I don't think they'll beat Notre Dame. I don't. I think they'll lose to Notre Dame, but here's the thing. That's not a conference game. It's not a conference loss. So they could – Miami's probably going to get to the ACC championship game, and they'll face Clemson. That'll obviously be their biggest test of the year. So I'm interested to see how that all plays out. But like I said, and then their last 2 games are laughers against Virginia and Pittsburgh, 2 just not good teams at all. So it's funny how college football works because a lot of – college football is weird because you see a lot of teams that challenge themselves early in the year without a conference games. I mean, you saw it with Florida State, Alabama this year, Florida, Michigan. A lot of these teams that are challenging themselves because they want that strength of schedule to look so good. But then all you got to do is look back to last year and the University of Washington, who had one of the worst non-conference schedules out there. I mean, they played the likes of Portland State, for God's sakes, and basically laughed their way all the way to the college football playoff, partly because they didn't challenge themselves and they were able to stockpile wins earlier in the year. So college football is really interesting to me right now. If you can find yourself – Wisconsin's another team, Zach. Wisconsin plays in the Big Ten West, which is the division that doesn't have Michigan State, it doesn't have Penn State, it doesn't have Ohio State, and it doesn't have Michigan. It has all the outcasts. It has it's the island of misfit toys over there. And they basically are going to laugh their way to the Big Ten championship game. And at that point, if that happens, they're going to be a top 10, possibly top 5 ranked team. And if they beat either Ohio State or Penn State, it looks like at this point, they could find themselves in the college football playoff when they haven't beaten anyone but one team. So college football to me right now is they're I don't want to use the word broken, but there's definitely some parts that need to be fixed because Miami and Wisconsin are two key examples of two teams that are ranked inside the top 10 that to me don't really I don't think they deserve it. They haven't done anything to deserve being ranked that high. So that's where we stand. That's actually the last I'll talk about it. I was going to talk about one more game, but it really didn't do too much for me. So that's all I have for Week 8 in college football, Zach. Those are the games that kind of stuck out to me. Going forward this weekend, as we look forward to Week 9, like I said, in college football, Notre Dame, a team I talked about, they have a big test. NC State comes to town. 14th ranked Wolfpack traveling to South Bend. So that's a big game. 3:30 kickoff. You have there's only 2 games, that being one of them. And then there's another ranked versus ranked game going forward. Another game that sticks out to me, there is another one, Oklahoma State and West Virginia. Now, that game's interesting to me because West Virginia, that's a big game for West Virginia. West Virginia has just kind of they've been hanging around. They had a loss early in the season, Week 1 actually, to the Virginia Tech Hokies, and they've won every game. They lost at TCU as well, but those 2 losses aren't anything to get too upset about. But this game going forward against Oklahoma State, man, this could really be a big win for West Virginia. It's at home. It's at 12 o'clock. It's an early start. Morgantown should be rocking there. And then the last game, obviously, Zach, Penn State travels to Ohio State, 2 versus 6. That game, I'm really looking forward to watching that game. Michigan, Penn State didn't live up to the hype at all. I think Ohio State, Penn State will live up to the hype, and I think these 2 teams are going to put on a pretty good show, and it should be interesting. If you had to ask me right now, I have a slight lean to Ohio State, but Penn State, man, they're clicking on all cylinders right now. So I'm not sure which direction to lean there, but it should be a damn good game, and that's a huge game. Whoever loses that game, I mean, that might be a college football eliminator because both of these 2 teams are in the Big Ten East, and neither one has a conference loss yet. So whoever loses is going to need the other team to lose one more game in conference. And I'm not so sure that's going to happen. Penn State is a pretty easy schedule going forward. Ohio State's biggest test the rest of the way is Michigan, and they don't look to be all that great this year. So this could be a college football playoff elimination game there in Columbus. So that's what we got for college football, Zach. I know you had something you wanted to kind of tie everything together here with college football and then into the NFL. Why don't you tell the listeners what you're thinking there?
So we've talked throughout the season so far about how a lot of quarterbacks have really stood out this year and are expected to be drafted pretty high. It was interesting to me looking at, based on the current standings, the top 3 picks heading into next year, all drafted quarterbacks this past year in the top 3 rounds. So right now, Cleveland Browns in the 2nd round took Deshaun Kaiser. You've got the San Francisco 49ers who just had their first start with C.J. Beathard, who was a 3rd-round pick. And then the New York Giants, who took Davis Webb in the 3rd round. And those would be the top 3 picks right now. And we talked a lot about Sam Darnold being at the top of the draft board, Josh Rosen, Mason Rudolph, or some other guys that have come up as top-end picks that could be available there. I was very curious on what your thoughts are when it comes to a team spending a draft pick, a high draft pick that doesn't come along that often for some of these teams, on a quarterback that they just used a high draft pick the previous year for that same exact position. I'm curious how you feel about making that decision.
Well, yeah. I mean, first off, that's a great question, and I really like kind of where your head's at here, as far as far as looking forward to the draft and what where teams stand and going forward and what they might potentially do with those picks. Well, first off, let's look at the top three picks. You said Cleveland, San Francisco, and the Giants each drafted a quarterback inside the top three rounds last year. Kaiser in the second, Beathard in the second, was it?
He was a third-round pick.
The third, okay, whatever, third, okay. And then Davis Webb as well in the third. Now, we've seen Kaiser. I thought him coming out of college, and I just didn't see an NFL quarterback. Kind of been proving me right there. He hasn't looked good at all.
Yeah, he's really struggled.
C.J. Beathard, I was really surprised when San Francisco took him in the third round. He's kind of that game manager quarterback that everyone likes to throw that term around, but doesn't do a whole lot for me. I don't think he's someone that you're going to be able to build your team around, and he just doesn't strike me as a franchise quarterback. And then Davis, I mean, we've seen him play a little bit. Beathard, he played the last 2 weeks. Will probably play again this weekend in Philly. And then Davis Webb, we haven't seen him at all. Eli, he started and played every game this year, so you're not sure what you have in Davis Webb, but he's that typical run and gun off quarterback. He's from Cal. Same kind of offense that what's his face ran, Goff ran, and guys like Patrick Mahomes, those kind of guys, the offenses they run, they don't need to huddle. He's that kind of quarterback, which I don't particularly like transitioning into the NFL. Just haven't seen it work out. So with those three picks, if there's a guy there that you think is a can't miss guy and you really, really like, you take him. I mean, point blank, you take him. If you're any one of those teams, yeah, if it was me and I was really high on one of them guys, yeah, I would take him. But Zach, also been on record, and I feel like you and I have had this conversation before. I've also been on record, and part of the reason why I think Cleveland has really struggled is they view drafting a quarterback as just like grasping at straws. It's like, eventually we got to get one of these right. Well, no, you don't, because the guys you're drafting, they're just not any good. And, oh, by the way, you had a chance to get Wentz or Goff last year, and you passed on both of them. So I'm not so sure what their thought process there is. So I'm not a big proponent of just drafting a quarterback because you necessarily need a quarterback. To me, drafting a quarterback is drafting someone that you believe solely 100% in and taking him and grooming him and hoping, obviously, that it pans out. Similar to kind of what the Eagles did. Now, obviously, you find yourself into situations sometimes like the Cowboys where they take a guy in the fourth-round pick and he turns out to be an absolute steal. But that doesn't happen very often, so especially the quarterback position. So that's where I stand. But if there's a quarterback there that they feel like is kind of a can't miss guy, which we talked about, this draft class for quarterbacks should be really good. And yeah, you absolutely have to pull the trigger.
I feel like that could work both ways with it being such a deep class that they could pull the trigger in the first round and take their guy that stands above all the others, or it does open up the opportunity for them to take someone that's going to be a stud at another position high and then wait and see who falls into the second round. Or the Browns also have the Houston Texans first round pick later in the draft that they could try for a quarterback there. And that's from the Deshaun Watson trade last year. The Bills are another team with 2 first round picks that could need a quarterback as well. That was from the Patrick Mahomes deal
Right.
they made with the Chiefs this past season. So those teams that have a slight advantage, but that's the advantage of these teams with their high picks, that they're going to get a high second round pick that they could potentially wait on and hope they can get someone like a Saquon Barkley or a Mike McGlinchey that's going to solidify that position and come around and get a quarterback the next round. I actually there's
real quick, Zach. The problem with that though is Cleveland. Ironically enough, they tried that a handful of years ago. They had 2 first-round picks. They took quarterback Justin Gilbert out of Oklahoma State with the first pick, the first of their first-round picks, and then the second pick, which was I think in the late teens, early 20s, was Brandon Weeden, which obviously didn't work out. So they were under that same thought process. Hey, there's some pretty good quarterbacks in this class. Let's get a stud defensive player in here, and then we'll draft Brandon Weeden, our quarterback, that we can bring in here, and he can save us. Guess what? Neither one of those players planned out at all. I'm just a big proponent of, look, if the guy is there and you really like him, and he's someone that you truly believe in, you got to pull the trigger.
That I'm 100% in agreement there. If they love him, I was saying more for an example, if they're not in love with someone, that they could choose that trading down example. You do bring up a good point, because that's something I didn't think of. The Browns have, for the last couple years, been kind of stockpiling picks and doing that same strategy, trading down, getting extra picks. And it has been a long time. I can't even think of the last time the Browns took a really high quarterback. Like, I think of Tim Couch in the late 90s.
That was the highest. That was the most recent, like the highest. That was the McNabb year, 1999, when Tim Couch was drafted first overall, actually. So, that was the last time, I'm pretty sure, that they drafted a guy that high. Here's a good trivia question for you, because I remember this like it was yesterday. Just because it was a snowy game, it was in Pittsburgh, and it was just one of those games that stuck with me. I don't know why. It just did. And I'll be really surprised if you get this, and I'll be impressed, man. I'll be really impressed if you get this trivia question for you. Who was the last Cleveland Browns quarterback to start a playoff game? I gave you a little bit there. It was against Pittsburgh. It was in Pittsburgh. Maybe this will bring back some memories. They actually got out to a huge lead, did Cleveland. They were rolling early in that game, and Pittsburgh eventually came back and ended up winning. I want to say it was like 2000 and it was probably like 2003, 2002, somewhere around there. Any idea?
See, I'm trying to think.
Once I say the name, you'll remember. I'm pretty sure.
I have a couple people, because I know they had Tim Couch, who failed there, and then they had they went through a couple different free agents they picked up. So I'm gonna guess Jeff Garcia.
No, Jeff Garcia did not take them to the playoffs. The answer is Kelly Holcomb. You remember Kelly Holcomb?
I do, now that you said it. I would not have come up with his name. The other one I was thinking of was Jake Delhomme, the former Pro Bowler.
Yes.
There, and he did all right there for a little bit.
Yep. Kelly Holcomb is the last, if I remember correctly, is the last Cleveland Brown quarterback to start a playoff game, which is
wow. I forgot about it. He had a surprise good year, and then he just dropped. I'm almost positive it was the very next year he started out horribly and was benched, just like all the other Browns quarterbacks through the years.
It's crazy. Have you ever you've seen that picture, right, of like that jersey with all the names of all the quarterbacks that have started? It's like it's taped on, and it's a big list. Have you seen that?
I have not seen that.
Oh my god, it's
outrageous.
It's a classic picture. It's so funny, and it just, you almost have to feel bad for Browns fans, just because it's like they were. I mean, when the Browns were when our parents were young, like the Browns were a good football team, and then they kind of started to go through some rough patches, and then the team leaves, and they don't even have a football team anymore. Ever since they, because the Ravens happened, and ever since they have come back, they've been pretty bad. So,
yeah, I feel like, because I'm always fascinated by, there's different graphs and visualizations of how successful different pick numbers are. I know I
Okay.
was looking at an NBA one over the summer for the NBA draft where
Yeah.
you can see that the number one overall pick, you have the highest chance of having, since it was NBA, it was an all-star, a starter, and then I think it was like a role player and bench player, and then or like end of the bench player and then never played in the NBA. And you could clearly see visually that it went in a pretty strong downward trend. Like obviously the higher picks had a better chance of success.
Right.
And then there were a couple of random ones. There was a weird one that was better than like the 3 or 4 picks ahead of it. I want to say it was like pick 8. Something
Okay.
random like that was consistently better than the couple picks ahead of it. But I feel like that's what the Browns need to do anyway. Just bet their money on what works. Take kind of a consensus high pick here. They have so many picks. They'll be fine using them on other guys. Some of the other teams are a little bit different. I feel like the 49ers could use a quarterback. There's been a lot of rumors about Kirk Cousins going there. So obviously that would change a lot of things. And then the Giants are another situation where you don't know how long Eli Manning will play. I feel like the organization, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and get him an offensive lineman or some kind of weapon so that he can try and maximize his last couple years in the NFL. I don't like that approach. I think they'd be much better drafting a quarterback and trying to prepare to start over with Odell Beckham and some Evan Ingram, some of those young guys they have. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle it. I am not sure. It could end up being that only one of those teams end up with taking a quarterback this next year, or even 0 of them if the Browns decide to go with a Saquon Barkley instead.
Right. Yeah. Why don't we quickly go through those? Why don't you read through those top, we'll say top 10 picks, and just kind of give an opinion whether you think that those teams should take a quarterback in the first round.
So the top 10, Browns currently number 1. I think they should. I would definitely say that.
I completely agree. 100%.
49ers are second. I would say yes, unless they sign Kirk Cousins, which I'd put it at below 50% chance of that they do that, but it's still a possibility. So as of right now, I'm saying 49ers should.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, if they get Kirk Cousins, which if those rumors are true and they want to go all in on Kirk Cousins and he ends up signing a big deal to go to San Francisco, that's obviously huge and would be huge for their franchise to have their quarterback of the future, and then they can really start to build around him. But yeah, if that doesn't happen, I'm with you. They need a quarterback because what they have right now isn't the answer, and it isn't going to, be the answer going forward.
Now, the next one with the Giants, I think they're in a better situation than those other 2 teams. And if Saquon Barkley is there, if the first 2 go quarterback, or something to that effect, I think it's a no-brainer to take him. To build around a team with Odell Beckham, Saquon Barkley, and Evan Ingram, that's a great foundation. That they come around next year, maybe go take a chance in the second round on a quarterback that falls a little bit. I think they could have a good foundation to build around for when Eli Manning is no longer playing there. And I like them not going for a quarterback this year, unless I think if both of the picks ahead of them go non-quarterback and they have their choice of any quarterback they want in this draft, take one. Davis Webb wasn't that high of a pick. He was a 3rd-round pick. If you have that opportunity, definitely take one.
Yeah, the Giants, it's funny because, obviously we're a long way from the end of the season, but, if this was the situation with the draft order, the Giants would be probably the biggest X factor in the draft right now because to have the choice of bringing in Barkley or drafting a quarterback – that's extremely interesting. But my biggest thinking here is, it's great and all to get all these skill position players in here, but that offensive line is still dog shit. I mean, it's really bad. And I mean, look, if you don't have an offensive line, you don't have anything. Offensive line and quarterback are extremely important. So they need to get that fixed up too. So the Giants are, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm glad I'm not the GM. Maybe some people think that they have a pretty easy draft coming up, but I think it's kind of a conundrum with, do we go quarterback? Do we wait and take a quarterback late again? Or do we take Barkley, or maybe we take one of the offensive linemen? I mean, they have a lot of options.
They definitely do. The mock draft I'm currently looking at has them taking tackle Connor Williams out of Texas.
Okay.
So I feel like that is a good fit. I don't really see the Giants making a wrong decision there. They have a lot of good options.
Right. It's a good point.
So number 4 currently would be the Indianapolis Colts. And they already have Andrew Luck. They're
not taking a quarterback.
Right. I like their situation, and it seems similar to me to the Dallas Cowboys a couple years ago when Tony Romo was injured for most of the season. They had a high pick and took Ezekiel Elliott. I think this is an opportunity for something like that with the Colts, that they get a good, strong piece to build around that team and continue building that foundation.
They're another team that their offensive line is really bad. I mean, if I'm the Colts here, I'm going offensive line. I mean, you have good skill. You have pretty good skill position players as far as wide receivers go. Running back, obviously, you drafted Marlon Mack last year. He's shown some nice flashes early. I would go offensive line here if I was the Colts.
I like that call. This current mock draft has them taking Derwin James, a safety there, because they could definitely use some defense.
Absolutely, yep.
So they'll have a lot of good options. Next one is the Chargers, which is very interesting too, because Phillip Rivers is their quarterback. He's getting up there in age. I believe he's 36. I don't have it in front of me right now, but he came in the same draft as Eli Manning, who we already talked about, and they don't have anything behind him right now. I would be in full support of them taking a quarterback here. I feel like they're a little bit more in the range of waiting here and drafting a quarterback in the second round, that they could draft another player, especially on defense. I feel like they could use that at this particular point in the draft. But having a top 5 pick for that team that has some decent pieces could definitely be interesting for them.
Yeah, they're another interesting team. It's, with the amount of quarterbacks this year, I mean, do you pull the trigger on a quarterback in the first round? Or, I mean, Rivers is showing, he can still play and still sling it at the age that he is, upper 30s. So do you try to get an impact guy in here and try to take make one more run at it? They're definitely another interesting team. I don't see them taking a quarterback in the first round, but at some point they need to start thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't see them taking a quarterback either. I really like the idea of them taking a quarterback in the second round. I think that'll be a perfect fit for them. Someone they can have learned behind Phillip Rivers and then be set to go in a couple years. So the next 2, the next 3, I do not feel like need a quarterback at all. So first one, Chicago Bears, who just drafted Mitch Trubisky at the top of last year's draft. I don't think there's any question that they're going elsewhere and trying to build around him.
Yep.
The Oakland Raiders have Derek Carr, still very young, and I do not think they'll end up this high in the draft. Currently, they're at number 7, and they will not be needing a quarterback. They have plenty of other holes to fill on that roster. And then after that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who already have Jameis Winston. He's still extremely young, I believe 23, and they should be fine. The next 2 are amazing. Number 10 is amazing to me. I'm going to skip to number 10 real quick because it just caught my eye. Number 10 is the Jets. This is a team that has seemed like they're tanking from the start, and they can't even do that right. They're sitting at number 10. They definitely need a quarterback. 100% they should draft a quarterback. but they're not going to get their top choice here after being currently 3-4, I believe it is, this season.
Yeah, and it's funny because
3-4.
they could be even lower on that list, Zach. I mean, we'll talk about it here briefly, but I mean, they blew a 14-point lead in the second half this past weekend against the Dolphins. So, they could be even lower on that list. So, probably help themselves out a little bit losing that game this weekend. So, the Jets, with all the suck for Sam and excuse me, all this, talk about, them getting one of these quarterbacks. I mean, they're barely inside the top 10. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play out if they, struggle down the stretch or if they continue to compete and be in ball games. And I mean, this would be like such a Sixers move. I mean, for the longest time, the Sixers were like finish middle of the pack, get an average player, finish middle of the pack, get an average player. And it was just like, they were just walking in quicksand. Like they just couldn't get any sort of movement. That is what the Jets are doing right now. That would be brutal. And for the New York Jets and their roster, having the 15th pick in the draft is not ideal. Excuse me.
They'll still have a good quarterback available. The mock draft in front of me has them taking Josh Rosen at 10. There'd still be some decent. It looks like Lamar Jackson would still be there if they'd fall to 15. According to this, obviously a lot of things could change. So they'll still have options regardless. It just won't be as good of an option of what we thought it would be going into the season.
Absolutely.
So as I mentioned, I did skip over one team. The number 9 team is currently the Cincinnati Bengals. So I'm not a big Andy Dalton fan. I would be in support if they'd take a quarterback.
In the first round, though?
I don't think they're
not in the first round.
There, I guess that's a good point. I just Andy Dalton just consists, and I don't know that it's just him. Some of it's the coaching. I know we talked about that earlier in the season.
I think a lot of it's the coaching.
But they just are always so mediocre, and they need some kind of change for sure. So it might not be in the first round, but I would support them drafting a quarterback somewhat early. Although I did forget they do have AJ McCarron who's done well in a couple starts here that could have some potential. They've been keeping around, and even though teams have inquired about trading for him, they've been keeping him on the roster.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lifelong Rivals Sports Podcast. We really appreciate it. We've changed some things up based on some of the feedback we've received, so we'd love to continue hearing your feedback. As we continue to build this platform with our podcast, it's very helpful to us if you can share it with the people you know that you think would be interested. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a great week.